timeless portraits of icons, small-town personalities, or overlooked communities. Lixenberg's images give us the bigger picture, a composite of the many different faces of the United States. As the Maison Européenne de la Photo in Paris spotlights her very personal perspective, she joins us to tell us about her American images. Toni Lixenberg, thank you so much for joining us. This show, American Images, takes us through 30 years of your photography, people and places in the United States. When you look at the earlier photos and then compare them with perhaps more contemporary ones, do you feel like your perspective on that society has changed?
The majority of the work in the show, they're projects from the 90s, early 2000s. Only in this project here, that I did in Imperial Courts, which is an ongoing project, there are some recent works in that, because this project is just covers it's half my lifetime. And I think I'm very consistent in my approach. So sometimes it's hard, like with Imperial Courts, you can't always tell if something is made 30 years ago or new. I would say it's bringing together projects that I did in different periods, but it covers it's also a portrait of a certain era in America.
And your portraits embrace very different spheres of American society, from anonymous people in small-town America to celebrities, artists, musicians. You made an iconic portrait of Tupac Shakur, the rapper, in 1993, just 3 years before he died at age 25. That photograph was reproduced endlessly.
Yes.
It's so well known. Tell us about the shoot and how you managed to capture something so essential.
I think, the portrait of Tupac was actually my first big assignment for Vibe magazine. And Vibe was a newly launched publication founded by Quincy Jones. And I didn't know at the time how lucky I was to connect with them. And one of the first commissions I got was the shoot with Tupac. I knew, his music a little bit. I think he's just started to really break through, and he wasn't as famous as he's now, or a little in the time just before he passed away. But he was becoming already a star. But for me, I kind of, when I photograph someone, I like to, I prepare, I listen to his music, I read about him, but I also try to kind of let go of that and really sort of just level with him as a fellow human or person. And I was less interested in him sort of posturing or doing this sort of thug life, posing, as a big tattoo thug life. And I felt he was just a really very soulful person, beautiful eyes, and you see these eyelashes. And but of course, I never could have expected that image later, especially after he died, was killed, that would take a life, have a life of its own. And that's quite incredible.
Lixenberg's series, Imperial Courts, documents a community in Los Angeles following the riots there in 1992, sparked by the death of Rodney King, an African-American man beaten so severely by police that he died of his injuries. Striking monochrome portraits, which won her the Deutsche Börse Prize for Photography in 2017 and showed her subjects in a very different light. South Central LA at that time had this image of gang warfare, criminality, poverty. You went there and met this community. What sort of counter-narrative did you want to provide?
I did an assignment for a Dutch publication on the rebuilding and destruction rebuilding of South Central LA, and we met some really interesting people, and I drove around. And I was living in New York, but I was, baffled by what I saw, and also how the media, like what you're saying, I mean, the way they were talking about the community, it felt very narrow, like very one-dimensional. And when I started, making, at that time you still had the 4x5 Polaroids. That doesn't exist anymore, that film, but it was peel-apart film. So with the same camera I make my photographs with, I was able to make tests and immediately give photos away. And this was the early 90s when there were no cell phones, people didn't have many photographs of themselves. So those Polaroids carried some weight, and so slowly more people became interested, or they kind of liked. And the fact that I wasn't walking around, I would never photograph someone who, you know, doesn't want to be photographed, who didn't want to be photographed. And
you knew the community well, formed relationships there, and went back over a period of 30 years. When you look at America today, everything that's happening with ICE, Trump's policies, how do you feel about the country?
That's such a big question. I think it's probably pretty clear what I think about the current politics, or that the fact that sort of a lot of views that before were sort of considered more fringe are now on the foreground. But I would say this to not necessarily, I mean, it's such of course it's heartbreaking what's happening, but I think there's always been a lot of, America's a very flawed nation, and at the same time I love it because I've met so many amazing people and amazing minds, and so it's a very complex country, very new, but injustice has been, you know, since before, okay, since the start of the foundation of the country.
And among the portraits of very well-known people, celebrities in the US, you made a portrait of Donald Trump when he was already famous, real estate mogul, man about town, not the leader of this country that he is today. You have said before that you hesitate to include that large format portrait in exhibitions. It's not here. Why is that?
It was in another show before things. I think sometimes it's the same. Yeah, it's not that I say it's in the slideshow. I created a slideshow, and the portrait is in there. I do think it's interesting because it's an aspect of American culture, and but I think right now it's so charged that it's not appropriate. I mean, I have so many options of things to show. I mean, also, I really loved the portrait I did of Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, or however. And it's a really interesting image because it shows the early days of him becoming a mogul, you know, with all the phones next to the bed. But at the same time, sometimes with someone is in the news in this way, or representing something really also very negative, you wonder, should it be in this constellation of images?
And one small specific group of people that you've documented was in Alaska, the Inuit community, the last days of Shishmaref. What did you learn during this experience about the relationship there between human and the natural environment?
Yeah, it's a very intricate relationship. They've been on this island for a long, long time, and you know, their ancestors are buried there, and they have a subsistence lifestyle. There's very few fresh vegetables. There's not much, or it has to be imported. So people hunt, you know, in different seasons. They hunt different animals, and there's traditions that they pass on, but a lot is also being lost because also they're Americanized. The kids, it's very interesting. Kids play basketball, listen to hip hop. We're really into the fact that I'd photographed Tupac with the same camera and the same lens that I was photographing them with. So they have to move eventually because they're one of the first communities in the US that are directly impacted by the consequences of climate change. The land is eroding, but it's also very costly to relocate. But I think in the Shishmaref series, it's a little more cinematic approach. I involve the environment more because they're so connected to their environment. I think, what did I learn? For me, it's always the experience of really stepping into a different community and hanging out with my camera. You know, I mean, when I'm in people's homes, especially with the family portraits, I really take time, I hang out, and things happen. And that intimacy is, for me, ultimately always very inspiring.
the disarming sort of simplicity, no staging, no elaborate props of your images can sometimes feel a bit at odds with this software-enhanced or AI-generated Photoshop culture of quite artificial images that we're living in this social media world. Do you think that will become the dominant style in photography? And what does it mean artistically and creatively if that's the case?
I mean, I try to not judge all these developments at all. It's the same as people. I'm intrigued by all the women, you know, creating the duck lips and the sort of fillers and the Botox and the sort of. I'm questioning my own why I'm judging. Why do I have such a negative feeling about it? But I see it immediately, and I find, you know, I think everybody has a different idea of beauty and what is beautiful. And for me, it has to do with certain physicality, and I do like flaws, and I sometimes find it such a shame when people do that to themselves. So it's the same with images. At some point in magazines, I've also tried to avoid interfering, you know. But that said, if someone has a big pimple in their face, it's better to retouch it, you know. Why leave it? So that I don't mind. That's just being kind, I guess. But that said, the portrait of Kate Moss, she was 19-year-old, and she has a little pimple on her forehead, and it's a black and white image. And the black and white work, they're all analog prints. They're hand prints, so they're not. You cannot remove anything there. So there, the pimple is there, but it's a very. She's still so stunning and photogenic and.
Dana Lixenberg, thank you very much.